Okay, so we're here in Zimbabwe with CEO Ben Turney, and I think just to kick things off, could you tell the story of how you find yourself here in Zim and what brought you here? What attracted you initially?
Well, it started with some work I did about 5 years ago for a PLC. I did some due diligence work on some projects in Zimbabwe, and through that I met a guy called Steve Smith, who's an exploration geologist with 40 years experience looking for gold all over southern Africa. Now, the last 16 years Steve's been based here in Zimbabwe. Before that he was the business development manager for Anglo American in Tanzania. So I got to know Steve through that process. Now, at the time, the company I was working for, they decided not to pursue the project in Zim. At that time, Zimbabwe was very much a dirty word as far as international investors were concerned, and as soon as you mentioned it, conversation stopped dead. That was it, no one interested at all. I stayed in touch with Steve over the coming years. We became good friends. Steve acted as a mentor to me when I first joined the board of Kavango. My background is in financial markets. Steve gave me a real sort of a grounding in technical exploration, helped me during the early days of Cav. And over this time we kept on talking about Zimbabwe. The more I learned about Zimbabwe, the more I liked about the country. We employ quite a few Zimbabweans through Cav. Hilary Gumbo, one of our co-founders, is actually from Zimbabwe and lives in Harare today. So we'd had a fair amount of exposure to the country, but by summer 2022 our exploration programs in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, were struggling. We didn't have the technical success that really the team deserved. Exploration in Botswana is very, very challenging. So we started to look further afield, and Steve persuaded me to come and visit Zim, and it was a phenomenal trip in August 2022, pretty much exactly 2 years ago from today. I spent 5 days out in the bush with Steve, tearing around, seeing projects all over Matabele land in the south of the country, and immediately saw the opportunity. And it was really from that point that started Cav's journey into this wonderful country.
Excellent. And then kind of Cav today, this is 2 years and you've moved very fast. So if you give Cav at a high level now, you have the Botswana side, maybe you can briefly kind of give a synopsis there and what the potential might be, and then how you're planning on, with Zimbabwe going forward and what it is currently.
So as it happened, the week I got back from Zimbabwe, I went to Botswana first, and it was on that part of the trip I met Dave Catterall. And Dave has really transformed our operations in Botswana. Where we were focused previously on the Kalahari Suture Zone and Detail, Dave has shifted our focus much more into the Kalahari Copper Belt, where we're currently drilling. Dave is the guy who is directly responsible for the discovery of Zone 5, which was recently sold to MMG for $1.8 billion. And he is really, I think, one of the world's go-to guys when it comes to exploration in the Copper Belt. So our efforts over there are very much led by Dave and guided by his experience. In Zimbabwe, it took us about 6 months before we actually made the commitment to come and move into the country, from September through to about March 2023. And from that point, it took another 3 months to negotiate the first options on our projects and then to move into the country. We set the company up in Zim in July 2023. 13 months later, we've drilled 6,000 meters. We've already made what looked like 2 discoveries. The company's moved into mining. So as you say, we have moved extremely quickly for an exploration company. And as we're going to see over the coming days, there is wonderful potential in this country, not just for Kavango and for our projects, but for the country as a whole. And we're really, really excited to be able to take you and your team around to view what we're doing.
Exactly. So just to clarify for people, the idea with BOSS, the high-level idea currently at least, is that you're going to make a discovery and then probably sell it. And then you're going to build, the idea is to build mines and reinvest more into SIM currently at least.
Exactly. So in Botswana, as you say, our strategy is that once we've made a discovery and we've developed it, it's going to realistically be too large a project for a company like Kavango to take through to mining. So there's a very strong track record in Botswana of those types of transactions, and the MMG deal I just mentioned being the most recent example. In Zimbabwe, because of where this country currently is globally, there's a lot of, we believe, sort of misconception out there about what this country actually represents. It's very low in the league tables for being a mining-friendly jurisdiction. It's actually towards the bottom, and as you and your team are going to see over the next few days, mining is in this country's DNA. I don't believe there's a single family in Zimbabwe that isn't in some way touched by mining economically, either through direct mining ownership of claims or through being involved in the supply chain. There really is a huge amount that's happening here, but what doesn't exist are the two things. First of all, there isn't really sort of modern international capital markets. That's severely constrained investment and the capital available to take projects forward. That's a key edge for a company like Kavango, as well financed as we are. The second thing that's lacking really in this country is the international market. Because there aren't many companies like us here, there isn't really that market for selling projects apart from to the Chinese, and the Chinese have invested a lot of money into Zimbabwe, but there aren't many companies like Kavango or any of the major mining firms that are operational here. So our strategy in Zimbabwe is we're looking for projects that are the right size, where we can make a discovery and we can bring those into production ourselves.
And then in terms of, just to kind of give a broad overview, I mean, what's your enterprise value currently, market cap, what's your cash position, do you have any liabilities? Just give them the quick financials.
So current market cap is about £23 million. We've just raised £2 million by a convertible loan from our cornerstone shareholder, Pure Bond. We've been very, very fortunate to have the family office of the Consagras backing us. They've acted as our cornerstone investor. Our current plans are now financed through to the end of the year. We've got a drill rig operating in Botswana and a drill rig operating in Zimbabwe, both continuously. We have plans for further financings that we will be sort of discussing sort of over the coming days, and by the time this video goes out, we're expecting to have raised quite a substantial amount more money.
Right, and we'll get back to that later, but let's talk about the shareholders. That's a very important piece here. You can access capital, you have strong backers. So tell the story with Peter and the Consagras and how that happened and where you are currently and what their vision is with the investment.
So that 4-week period when I came to Zimbabwe and then Botswana in summer 2022, met Dave Catterall. Well, when I got back to England that week, I met Peter Winterby. Peter has had an incredibly successful career in developing mining companies. He was active in Zimbabwe 30 years ago with Reunion Mining. He's got a number of really significant successes under his belt, most recently with the Mimbula copper asset and Moxico Resources in Zambia, where he took that from an initial $100,000 investment in 2015 to a company that's now privately held and worth over £1 billion. He went into Zambia at a time when no one was interested in Zambia. The country had recently tried to nationalise all the mining assets, and of course the copper market was nowhere near as strong as it is today. So Peter is very much a contrarian, and when I met Peter for the first time in September 2022 and gave him the pitch for Kavango, he bought into the vision. Now the Consagra family have been strong backers of Peter in Moxico. They currently own about 7 or 8% of that company. And in October 2022, we did a financing. Peter got Bullo and Ramesh to put a £1.5 million into Kavango as a toe in the water. And that was really the beginning of the relationship. From that point onwards, the more that the Consagras learned about the company, the more they saw us in action, the more they liked about what we were doing, in particular our vision for what we wanted to achieve in Zimbabwe. In January 2023, Peter actually joined our board, and in May that year we then secured a further £6 million from Bullo and from Ramesh, and it was at that point they became 52% shareholders in the company, acting as our cornerstone moving forward. And it's really their financial firepower that's enabled everything that you're going to see over the next few days and the progress that we've made. It's really thanks to that incredibly strong support that we've had from our major shareholders that's enabled us to build what we've built.
And I think now before we head out to the field, let's go with Steve and take a look at all the information and knowledge that he has, because he is really a key guy here for all actors.
Steve is absolutely critical, and what you're going to see over the coming days is the amount of information that he's accumulated. In the 15 years he's been active here, we've got a world-class data set that Steve is directly responsible for bringing together, which we have direct access to. It gives us such a major advantage in this country, understanding about the history of what's actually happened here, both in terms of mine development, but also in terms of exploration historically. Now, there hasn't been much exploration over the last 25 years, and I think one of your impressions that I'm hoping that we're able to communicate to you is how big the opportunity is out there. You'll see so much mining activity everywhere you go, but it's relatively small scale, and there's next to nothing in terms of modern exploration that's being done. But you're right, it all begins with Steve, with his knowledge, with the data that we have access to, and then our team being able to tap into that and access that then to develop our program. So yeah, we're really looking forward to showing you all of this.
Excellent. Let's go take a look and then we'll head out to Nara.
Excellent.
Okay, my name's Steve Smith. I'm a technical consultant for Kavango here in Zimbabwe. I've been here working in Zim for about 15 years. And the first thing I want to do is to just set the scene by giving you some idea of the endowment of the country. Here's a map of Zimbabwe, geology map obviously, with 22 greenstone belts marked here in green, and you can see all these little lines on the greenstone belts relate to known gold deposits. There's something like 6,000 registered mines in Zimbabwe. It's very well endowed. It's got gold, it's got lithium, it's got the Great Dyke with platinum, chrome, it's got tungsten, it's got coal bed methane, it's got coal. It's a very well endowed country altogether. As I said, there's 22 greenstone belts. We're going to focus the next few days on the Bulawayo-Philabuzi belt here. And one thing I should say is that not many people know this, but in 1980, Zimbabwe was producing more gold than Australia. And the gold mining industry has very much stagnated since then, while it's been a boom in Australia. We've got a lot of information on historical information on these mines available to Kavango, and I'll take you through and have a look at the data room in a few minutes. Okay, we've just come across to the data room. We've literally just finished constructing, and we've only just moved all the information in here. You can see by looking around, there's an awful lot of plans, drawers full of geophysical information, old aerial photographs. We have files on many different mines and prospects from old data. It's all handwritten stuff or type stuff. It's probably the only data like this in existence. Stuff that's been collected from people's garages, from old mine offices that have fallen into disrepair. I found plans with rats' nests in them, wasp nests, and we've now scanned all the plans. We've still got a big job to do to digitize it all. To give you some example, we've even got the entire sampling. There's a drawer for the rest of these files for one of the mines, which allows us to put that together in 3 dimensions. And obviously that sort of information will give you a good competitive advantage and allow you to kickstart your exploration program. And all this information is available to Pambili and to Kavango, which a lot of it is unique. It no longer exists. It's the original stuff that we've managed to save and put together. Okay, just to set the scene on the Nara project, we're going back to the Philabuzi published geology. Nara is sitting about here. There's a cluster of mines around it, and it sits on a large regional shear zone that's running through here, through the centre of the belt like that. Which incidentally also is the location for the Hillside project, which is about 20 to 30 k's away. So just moving over to a more detailed map to set the scene here, you can see this is the boundary of the Nara license here, and it's a package of metasediments and metavolcanics with some band and iron formations running through here and some pentonites. Here you can see the extent of the underground workings and other shafts and a number of artisanal workings. And what we did initially is we put a scoping hole into each of these to test to see which is going to give us the best bang for our exploration buck. And it's from that we'll make our decision on the rest of the exploration program. Incidentally, what you can also see here is the extent of the mine workings at Nara on the main shaft. This isn't the full extent. There's actually another sheet that we don't have, unfortunately, but you can see from the stoping 2 different ore bodies have been mined. one crosshatch like that, another crosshatch like that, and obviously that area they've both been mined. And we've got all the sample results here in pennyweights and inches, which we've recalculated out, and we now have this captured digitally, which hopefully we'll be able to show you that spinning around in 3 dimensions a bit later, together with the geophysics.
Hi, my name's Dave Catterall. I'm one of the consulting geologists working for Kavango. Here we are at Nara. We drilled a series of 6 holes through Nara, all scoping holes underneath workings, like these artisanal workings along here, some more artisanal workings along here. The main old historic mine is Kenton Kalani, which is situated in this area here. And if I draw a cross section through there, you'll see there's the borehole running down through the IP. There's some kind of structural feature coming through here and a structural feature coming through here. And we intersected high gold grades in this area, this area, this area, and this area, which are associated with structural features coming through here. And then that's the junction between this set of sediments and this set of sediments.
Alright, so now we're here over at Nara. We just arrived, and I think before we ask Steve some questions to explain the setting here in the Filabusi part of the Greenstone Belt, Ben, can you kind of explain how you got to know Steve? Because as we spoke previously, he's kind of the mastermind of putting this together in a sense. So what's the connection there? Tell the story.
The mastermind, indeed. So Steve and I met about 5 years ago. I was doing some consulting work for another PLC in London. They were doing some due diligence on gold projects in Zimbabwe, and Steve was involved in that project at the time. So that was how I got to know Steve, through that. Over the years, we stayed in touch. I'd like to think we became friends. You know, we've got on very well, certainly at times. And yeah, I lent on Steve quite a lot when I joined Kavango's board in January 2021. Steve acted really as a bit of a guide and a mentor to me through his technical experience. So there was a lot that I learned from Steve. Over the years, he kept trying to persuade me to come to Zimbabwe, but we were obviously fully committed with what we were doing in Botswana. But by the summer of 2022, we recognised that we needed to change things up in terms of our strategy. We weren't getting the technical success that the team deserved in Botswana. It's a very challenging terrain, and Steve persuaded me to come down to Zimbabwe in August 2022 to look at the enormous potential there is here. He picked me up from Bulawayo Airport. He took me straight out to the field. We spent 5 days together, tearing all over Matabele land, and the rest is history. I immediately fell in love with this country. I saw the potential. I saw what we as a business could achieve here, and that was really how it all came to be.
Yeah. And maybe Steve, could you just give your own history with Zimbabwe, and I mean your time working here and all of the different ventures that you've been involved with? Just give a high-level overview.
Sure, I was in charge of new business for Anglo American in Tanzania. Back in the late 90s. Then I gave up geology for a while and did some conservation, but then afterwards I came back into geology, and I got involved in Zimbabwe, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing in terms of the endowment here compared to what I'd seen in Tanzania. Bearing in mind, Tanzania had a number of really massive discoveries in the late 90s, up to about 45 million ounces or more. And I got so excited by the place, and I reconnected with a guy I used to work for in South Africa years ago, and we worked for a couple of companies here, and it's like being a geologist here is like being a kid in a candy store. It's as simple as that, really. So can't get away from it. That's basically the bottom line.
And we saw on the drive in here the last sort of 50 kilometers we drove. It's unbelievable how many mines and stuff there are all over the place, and almost none of them are within sort of, I guess, more commercially traditional companies that we see in Canada or the US or Europe or places or other places in Africa in comparison. So it's unbelievable. But maybe you can just tell the high level story. If we just look at the Greenstone Belt, big level, not necessarily this part of it, but just the high level narrative for Zimbabwe, if you just recapitulate.
Sure, I mean, there's 22 greenstone belts here, comparable size to Lake Victoria greenstone belts in Tanzania, where I've got experience, obviously. Late 90s, 45 million ounces of discovery in Tanzania, including Gator Mine, I think something like 23 million ounces. Virtually no modern work done here in Zimbabwe at all. So there are over 6,000 registered mines, numerous artisanal mines that have never been looked at, never been commercially looked at, never been looked at in terms of economies of scale. It's just got so much potential. So that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and today, I mean, it's undercapitalized, has I would say, overly critic perception for sure in comparison. I mean, if you compare to other jurisdictions in Africa, I think it's similar or even better.
Plus the fact that it's actually a very nice place to be. I mean, despite the bad reputation it might have in the news, it's a beautiful country. The people are friendly, things work, there are roads. Virtually every mine you go to has got electrical supply. It's actually a pleasure.
And I guess maybe Ben, you can comment or add on to that the business perspective, the lack of capital, and that kind of part of the story quickly.
I think you've touched on one of the key issues, that there's an impression around the world that Zimbabwe is a very difficult place to operate. It's consistently at the bottom of the league tables for mining as a mining-friendly jurisdiction. But as you yourself have seen on just this one drive today, there is mining activity absolutely everywhere. I don't believe there's a single family in Zimbabwe that it isn't in one way touched by mining, either working in the mines directly, mining directly for gold, or involved in the supply chain. Mining is very much in this country's DNA. Because of a lot of the economic difficulties the country has faced over the last 2 decades, there isn't much in terms of capital markets as we would recognise back home, and that for us we think is at the heart of the opportunity. This country is chronically undercapitalised for the scale of opportunity there is here. But the other side of that coin is, because people have been so resourceful and they've developed the economy as successfully as they have, the payback period on actual dollars invested is very, very short. You know, you're looking at projects that will pay back within 8 to 12 months, which competitively puts this country, I think, in a very, very strong position internationally. So, like Steve said, there's the infrastructure here, there's the people here, the projects are clearly here. I mean, you can just see how much gold mining activity there is. But they're barely scratching at the surface at the moment. The larger scale opportunity, the bulk mining opportunity, it's hardly been touched in this country, and it is just an enormous opportunity for companies like ours to be involved in.
And if we zoom in on this part of the Greenstone Belt, and just look here regionally, Steve, I mean, what's your comment on it? Maybe you can highlight some of the known sort of occurrences in comparison. Of course, Nara and Hillside screens extremely well in terms of its potential, though.
Nara is where we are in a minute, is sitting on a very large regional shear zone that sort of runs right down the centre of the belt, and it's got any number of deposits along it. Again, most of which haven't been looked at. Nara, the Nara ground here has got a historical production of about 90,000 ounces at 9 grams per tonne. One of the mines did 72,000 ounces at 10 grams per tonne. If only the mining depths just about 200 metres, but not fully mined. So these deposits elsewhere in Zimbabwe are being mined down at 1.3 kilometres as we speak. So there's still huge potential for underground mining here. Either narrow, high grade, or bulk mining, we don't know yet for sure. But and as you can see out here, a lot of this area on the eastern side of Nara is relatively flat and covered. So there's potential for things to be found undercover as well. So this greenstone belt has got a lot of potential. There's a huge number of deposits. Many of them tend to be located around the outside of the greenstone belt, near the contacts with the granites. And apart from this, these ones running with the big shear zone in the middle. So there's just heaps of potential.
Yeah, and then I think we can cover right away now is the option agreement that's on Nara currently. Why has that not been exercised? I mean, can you explain the strategy about it, when you intend to do that, and
So our strategy in Zimbabwe is we're not coming in and just simply buying projects. We're negotiating options with project owners to give our field team the opportunity to come and explore the ground. So we're not going to just simply buy projects sight unseen. We want to understand what the actual potential is. We're currently into the second year of a 2-year option at Nara. We've already conducted quite extensive exploration here. We've uncovered what we believe is the evidence of a large-scale gold mineralising system. The option itself runs until the end of June 2025, so we've got about another year left to go. To exercise the option, it will cost us $4 million. That's the terms that we've agreed beforehand. At the moment, we still need to do more work to identify exactly what the potential is. We came in looking at one deposit model, one deposit style, but I think it's fair to say the results so far are suggesting that actually the opportunity here might be more of an underground opportunity. So we're shifting our focus a bit, but again, this is to be expected in exploration. One of the great things about working in Zimbabwe is how fast you can move through these projects. Because we know where the gold occurrences are, because of the level of mining activity that we see everywhere, a lot of the prospecting in Zimbabwe has actually already been done. For a company like Kavango, that's a fantastic situation to be in, because it means a lot of the initial hard work has already been taken care of. It then enables our team to come in and work very quickly through the modern exploration techniques and the modern technologies that we can deploy to assess the potential of what's here. So that's exactly what we're doing at Nara. It's what we've done at Hillside as well. The Hillside project, we got off to a faster start, so we've exercised that option already because the potential there was so clear. At Nara, we still have a bit more work to do.
Yeah, and Steve, before we kind of pop over and start to showcase more upfront the various sites and what you've done in more detail, could you just kind of showcase, because you have an exploration target here between 500,000 ounces to 2.5, right? Can you explain how you're thinking around the system? You have multiple parallel trends of gold underground. Can you just explain kind of high levels people have an intuition about it?
If you want to look at the potential, you've got about 4 kilometres of strike here. Yeah. You've got 800 metres of already historical underground development over that 4 kilometres strike. You've got artisanal discoveries along the 4 kilometres of strike. You've got 4 historical mines here with past production, and the main mine with the 800 metres of strike has got at least 2 parallel zones with a splay that we know of. Yeah. There's been no underground drilling done on that deposit at all in the past. At the present stage, we've only got 1 hole through it. So that's where you can, if you take that down to 500 metres or a kilometre or whatever you like, and look at the past grades that came out of the mine, that's how you can estimate what the potential might be, without even knowing what's hidden undercover or what hasn't been discovered yet.
Okay, and in terms of next steps on a high level as well, before we go take a look more up close, is it essentially just continuing to drill, incrementally doing a couple of holes, taking that in, processing that data? You don't need to do more mapping or soils, or you're fairly past the geophysics and these kind of pre-drill?
We've done geophysics, we've done soils. What we've got plenty of artisanal targets to look at. So what we've effectively done in the first pass is what we'd call scope drilling. We've put 1 hole into a number of different targets to see where we're going to get the best bang for our exploration buck. In other words, the most ounces per drill metre. Yep. And then we'll go back to what looks like the best target and do some follow-up work, which is more or less where we are at the moment.
And essentially all of these different zones that we'll go and take a look at more closely, they are all taking a look at the same structure along this 4 kilometre strike, or trying to, or do you also have parallel ideas that's kind of offshoots?
There are offshoots and parallels as well, yeah, as well as the main structure. I mean, it's a big shear zone, it's not just one structure, it's a whole series. It's an anastomosing system, there's a whole series of them. There are cross structures as well.
Excellent. I think, yeah, let's just go and take a look up close.
Great, that'd be good.
Excellent.
Okay, we've come now to, we're standing on the shaft sinking waste from the main Kalani shaft, which is just over there. We'll have a look at that in a minute. And when I first came here in 2010, I think it was, none of this was just an old dump and it hadn't been disturbed. Now the whole thing's been picked over, reprocessed, the workings have been opened up along strike. There's 800 metres of underground workings below us. It's been opened up to about 5 metres wide over here, and hopefully a bit later on you'll get to see the extent of the strike on the drone survey.
Okay, so we're here with Dennis Trangira, who's a senior geologist with Kavango, and he'll tell us about the shaft here to the underground workings.
Yeah, this is the main Kilani shaft, double compartment shaft. So this will provide access for Kavango to go deeper. The mining was only done to about 200 meters from the surface, and it's been flooded for quite some time, so it means all the resources and the reserves, they are quite protected. At the moment, only mining at a small scale have been happening. As you can see over there, we've got some sacks of ore, so it means as Kavango, we can bring up more effective methods of mining here.
And in terms of the extent of the workings, it's 800 meters. And in which direction does it go? If you can just orient people so we can see the workings. Is it going this way?
Yeah, almost east to west.
East to west.
That's the strike of the workings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're a little bit further along strike down from the shaft that we just visited, and we're here with Grant White, who's a senior geologist. And why don't you tell us a bit about where the cores and the holes have been bored so far?
Okay, so as you can see behind us here, you can see where the guys have worked along strike before. They've gone up as far as they can until they hit a dike, and then they stopped. So what we've done is we've drilled a hole 90 degrees to the strike over that side, and we tried to intersect at depth what they've been finding on surface. So at the moment, our last hole that drilled right here went to the depths. We found intersection about 200 odd meters, about 2 meters of about 3 grams per ton. So there is showing there is something interesting down there. We just need to obviously explore a bit more.
And along this main strike, how many holes have you drilled intersecting the structure?
We've done 6 holes along our area here. Some of them are on this main structure, some of them on displays on the side. So we're targeting basically anything that we think could hold mineralization.
So I guess we'll jump over now to Sitcom and actually look at the cores.
Okay, welcome back. We're at the camp, at Sitcom camp, and we're going to be looking at the core. So we recently looked at Nara. We're going to start going through that. Here's a basic overview of the project. So we got Nara and other 2 prospects. Now we're going to go to those later. Let's concentrate on Nara. Nara at the moment is sitting inside the greenstone belt, and we have a red wing shear running through it. We'll talk about that as we go through. Over here is a more close-up detail of the work that we've done. So you can see the red wing shear coming through, and you can see basically where we've been drilling through the areas. Now in this area here, the zone that we're looking at is about 200 meters wide, and we've got an extent of about 5 kilometers. This area historically has had 4 mines that have produced over 90,000 ounces, which is pretty impressive. On top of that, they've also had some inklings of tungsten and silver in this place, as we've seen. Now, we have looked at the artisanal workings, the mineralization mapping, and based off some of the geophysics work that we've been doing. We've now chosen to show you guys the hole that we saw recently at Nara. This hole here is based on, there's a mine there, old mine, and we're drilling underneath it to see if we can find further extent at depth. Let's go take a look. Okay, so the geology in the area here is basically metabasalts and metasediments. And the metabasalts are the greenstones that we're looking at, and there's a lot of shearing involved. Obviously, we're in the major shear zones. So as we start from the top, you can see the metabasalt, and there's a lot of shearing. As you can see, it's very broken up, and we'll start coming down. Our first zone of mineralization will be over here. Now this is about 2.1 meters, And as you can see, we've got shearing coming through and we've got oxidized sulfides. Average grades that we're seeing here over the 2.1 meters is 1.76 grams. So we've got zones of 2.3, 2.2 and the 0.5. And let's go to the next one. So as you go down, you'll start seeing that the metabasalts will change into metasediments and then bounce back. And this will be all the way through the core as we can see it. Okay, over here, we're into the metasediments. In the metasediments, we start off with a quartz vein intruding on the top, and you start seeing arsenopyrites, these nice silvery color of minerals coming through. Within this here, we've got shearing, and we start seeing our grades turning up. So on the edges of the quartz veins, we start seeing a lot of arsenopyrites, and our grade goes up to 2.63. As it goes through, this area here is just over a meter and averages out at 1.88 grams. We have another break where we have a low grade, but then it goes back into another grade over here, which is a higher one, 7.02 grams. As you can see, there's an intrusive quartz vein coming through, and on the edges, you start seeing the arsenopyrites. This is obviously of great interest to us, and we're at a depth of about 235 meters. Now this should be just below the workings we see in the mine.
Okay, when we were at Sidcombe and we were looking at the core, we discussed the pinch and swell nature of some of these quartz veins or some of the deposits, and I want to illustrate that with the underground map from one of the Nara mines. So if we focus in here, you can see this is a longitudinal section. The stoping is hatched. There were 2 zones stoped. The drives are marked, and the raises and all the values are marked alongside the drives in inches and pennyweights. It's 14 inches and 2.5 pennyweights in that particular case. It's quite detailed sampling. And what I'd like to show you is what can happen over a relatively short distance. So here's the same area here recalculated, and you can see from that sample there to that sample there, a distance of 4 meters. You've got a change from 6 inches or 15 centimeters at 1.6 pennyweights, which is 2.49 grams per ton, right up to increasing to 100 inches or 2.5 meters there at 4 grams per ton. So what this shows you is if you drill through here, you're going to get a completely different value than if you drill through here, even though it's across a short distance. And these things can be even more variable. So, and this illustration shows you on the micro scale, on a hand specimen scale, exactly what you see on the macro scale, where you've got a quartz vein pinching out, and the value across here will probably be much higher than the value will be across here. Now that's important because it means you simply can't write off a deposit by drilling one borehole and getting a sub-economic grade. You have to drill several to make sure that you've not just unfortunately drilled a pinch or a low-grade zone. You need to have several pierce points to make sure you can average things out.
Okay, now, so before leaving, we've kind of popped over here to at the back of the tailings and with the stamp mills in the background there as well. We just want to ask Ben how he thinks on potentially getting back into operation here at Nara once the option has been exercised.
So we're obviously looking at the potential for open pit and also for underground. We think the project is leaning itself more towards an underground operation, so there is more work that we need to do before we decide on exactly how we would bring a project like this into production. But the plan is, as with at Hillside, we'll be looking to commence resource drilling pretty much straight away, and of course immediately getting into mining. We've been up to the Killarney shaft, which is about half a mile away from where we're standing at the moment. That's been mined down to about 7 level, about 200 meters. The ore reserves are currently protected because it's flooded up to 5 levels. So from 5 to 6 and 7, that's currently flooded and inaccessible. So part of the first work that we would look to do here in Zimbabwe will be to pump out the old shaft and look to commence mining in the existing shaft. There's also the Kent shaft that's just behind the dump over here that collapsed in about 2007. So that hasn't been accessed for quite a long time. That ran down to about 14 levels. So we'll also be looking at the potential for possibly sinking a shaft into this area too.
And just to give some context, you've described it in these tailings here behind us, it's sort of like a half a gram, 2.6 grams ton of gold. So you have some contained gold there to extract. But the stab mills that you currently have, what kind of throughput approximately would you expect to see from them as they stand currently?
It obviously varies depending on how hard the material they're processing, but I think in total you're looking at around about the production of about 50 tonnes a day across the entire site. So it's pretty prolific for an operation of this size, and it's very well run, but obviously we see a lot more potential than that. We'd be looking to get into the hundreds of tonnes a day as quickly as we can.
Welcome to your site. My name is Bulk-Tonnage. I'm the processing plant manager. So on my next seat, standing right next to me, I've got Noku, who should introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Noktula Masugu. I'm the HSEC officer for Kavango Mining.
So right now, we'll take you through the whole process at Hillside. But basically, before we go to where there's a lot of noise, I'll just explain in detail that we have got a lot of claims that we have got artisanal miners who are mining in different those claims. So basically, ore is coming from different ends. As you can see on our ground, we've got a lot of ores that we are processing. These are coming from different sites, claims and everything, and they've got different grades and sort of. So our plant capacity right now, it stands about 24 tons per day, with each mill doing about 12 tons, but in totality we've got 24 tons. So let's go through the whole process. Right now we're operating the whole 24 hours a day, depending on the availability of the ores. But as you can see, we just have to run throughout the 24-hour period. So the major limitation will be in terms of ZESA power cuts and maintenance. But otherwise, we are running throughout it so that to cope up with the ores that we have on ground.
All right. This business is viable when we follow safety, health, and environmental policies. So we speak to the Occupational Health and Safety Policy of Zimbabwe. Our objectives and targets, they include hazard identification and risk assessment, and the reduction of all risks and impacts on the environment, to the people and the community at large. We also go through training and education of all our employees together with contractors on site, and we also have issues to do with compliance. We comply to all the legislation that is under Zimbabwe, and as well as occupational health and safety management systems. I think that's much about it. Let's go around.
Welcome to our new project that we're working on in line with the particle size reduction. As I've said before, our ore is coming from different sites, and these ores they come in different particle sizes. So in order to increase our throughput, we have tried to install a new jaw crusher so as to reduce the product size to the mills, so that our residence time reduces also and we increase our throughput. So currently we have got two stamp mills, stamp mill number one and stamp mill number 2, which are running currently. And then we are currently working also on the third project, which is our third stamp mill, so as to increase our throughput. So each stamp mill runs at about 12 tons per day. So cumulatively, we're doing 24 tons. If the third one comes into effect, it will be doing 36 tons. So let's move on to what is happening beyond there, whereby the artisanal miners are now recovering some of the free gold. So as you can see, we have done milling the first batch. The artisanal miners are now washing the blankets so as to recover the free gold. So basically this is what is happening now from this end. So from this end we've got the tailings that go through, which go into our different ponds. These are cycling ponds. That way we gather all the tailings from the stem mills. From henceforth, we recover two things from our cycling ponds. We have got clear water, which we use for processing. So it's in a closed circuit. It comes back because water is very important when it comes to processing. So the clear water overflows at the top, and the final product circles at the bottom. So basically, as you can see, the guys is washing the blankets to recover all the concentrates with the free gold. So let's move on to the next stage. So from this point, our clear water, as I said before, overflows and goes back into the mills. And then the underflow, which is our circled solids, we offload them by the pet. We offload them by the pet. We have got a TOB. I think one of the machines, you can see them at the top there. The TOB loads into that dump truck, which takes the sands now into our leach section. So we are now going to go to the leach section, which is another important section where by now we are using, we're trying to leach as much as we can of what has been left or leachable gold. So we use the main chemicals that we use are cyanide and caustic soda, and the process itself is static. So it's called vat leach, static in nature, whereby we load the stuff into tanks, we soak it with water, the solution with cyanide and caustic soda for a period of 12 hours. And then after 12 hours, we open up to drain the pregnant solution that would have dissolved gold in solution. So let's move on to the next section. That is our last section. So before we proceed, I'll probably hand over to our health and safety officer. Remember, everything is guided by our health and safety laws based according to Zimbabwe. So basically, Noko, we explain much in terms of health and safety when it comes to this section and other related issues.
Okay, here we have come to our cyanide leaching tanks. So nobody goes beyond that point without authority, because there's chemicals, a lot of chemicals, where you can't just have contact without the right protective PPE. So for the moment, what we're doing, we're trying to put in place waste management, and we also do prevention of pollution in all our activities. So we can go through and check it out.
Welcome to our leach plant. This is a static leach plant. We've got 12 tanks, each with a capacity of 22 tons. So cumulatively, we are able to process about 260 tons at any given time. So what happens here is, as I said before, we load our tanks with sands, either coming from that section. So what happens is we soak with water for a period of 12 hours. This water has got cyanide and caustic soda. So after 12 hours, we drain the tanks. We will take you through to what we call the clarifier, which collects the clarified solution, which has gold in it, which now moves on to the next stage, which is absorption, where we've got carbon, which absorbs the gold in solution and then takes it back to what we call aqueous form before it tails back into the barren ponds. So we have got 12 tanks that we load at any given time, as you can see from the numbering. So let's move on to the clarifier, which collects our clarified solution, which has got a pregnant liquor in it. This is now our mini lab, what I can call a metallurgical lab. In each and every process, as you know, we have got process control measures. Process control measures, I mean, we determine how much gold we've been able to leach from those tanks. So what is happening now, we have got two guys, which are what I can call our lab assistants. These guys, they have got the experience. What they're simply doing there is checking for the level of gold in solution, using different chemicals. They normally use aqua richia, and also they also use HCl. There's a lot of issues to do with titrations samples with cyanide. So now they are checking for the level of gold in solution. So what we simply do is the color itself can tell us how much gold there is. Like if, for instance, this tank has been running for how many days now? For 3 days. So that's why it's a bit light dark. So if it is dark, it will indicate that there's still gold in it. So otherwise, in the modern world, we'll take samples to town, whereby we would read through what we call an AAS machine. That would be ideal to tell us in terms of numbers, like 0.2, 0.5 grams per ton of gold in solution. But on site, we use this method, whereby we use zinc dust together with aqua regia, which will be able to tell us how much we have in terms of gold. So basically, this is what is happening. This is a traditional way of determining our gold in solution. So let's move on to the clarifier, where we'll see the gold moving through into the circuit in solution. So as we can see, our clarified solution is coming from the respective tanks that we have shown you. So basically at the bottom of each tank, we've got a filter bed dressing, which is made up of, we've got sand, we've got big stones, we've got what we call SN bags, or this type of CQC, which is on top here, which is able to retain much of the solid and allow only clear solution to pass through, of which the clear solution, that's the one that collects into the sponge, what we call a clarifier. So this clarifier holds up all the pregnant solution that is with gold. So at this point in time, we have got our gold in solution form or aqueous phase. So once it moves from here, it moves by gravity into our carbon absorption circuit, which is inside here. But for safety reasons, we have the place is locked up not to allow anyone. Now, what we can simply call in other terms, this is more or less our bank. As you can see, it's written carbon room. So in here, we've got we've got a box with different compartments. These compartments have got carbon in them. Each compartment is about 37.5 kgs of carbon. So what happens is our solution moves through in stages through that carbon circuit. This is again an old traditional way of doing things. There are modern things like carousels whereby carbon solution is pumped through the circuit itself. So this again also becomes a bottleneck, but there's need to probably improve from this stage to other advanced ways of absorbing gold through carrying out different test works and stuff like that. So once the solution goes through, our solution has been stripped of the gold, and the gold remains here in the carbon. It's absorbed, and the material that goes now, the water that goes there, has been stripped of gold. It has nothing in it. So again, we do tests for the gold if there's anything in terms of gold in that solution. Right now we are in what we call our barren pond. Our barren pond, this is now the solution that has gone through the carbon absorption circuit. This solution now doesn't have any gold in it. It's only barren solution. So this water now, we don't throw it. Remember, it has chemicals in it. So I'll probably later my health and safety officer explain further on in terms of management of this solution.
So in terms of this solution here, as he was saying, Fulton was saying that this is barren solution. In this way, we call it a water reticulation system. So what goes down, this water goes back into the system and it's reusable. And here we've got our equipment, our cleaning equipment. So it's cleaning some of our water back into that fresh water pond there, so that we can reuse it in our process. So it goes back to the process so that we do not waste on water. So that's another way of managing our resources. So water is always in cycle.
So the next issue would be what happens once the tanks are done. Our process takes about 7 days for us to leach the gold from the tanks. So once we have leached and seen that there's nothing that is left in those sands, we now offload using a TOB, and we load the material into a dumper. So we've got what we call a tailing storage facility, whereby we take now our sands, which is in solid material, and we deposit that side by the tailings storage facility. And right now we're just doing what what we can say, it's solid stuff. It's not like a pulpy like in other systems. So it's user-friendly, easily manageable. So as you can see from that end, that's our storage, tailings storage facility whereby we store our tails. Now we are going to take you to our underground operations, which we are currently working on. That's more or less what we have that site. So we're moving on to our underground operations.
My name is Clayton Ngube. I'm the mining manager for Kavango. I'm solely responsible for the underground shaft and the protection that is going to be coming out from here.
And my name's Dale Blair. I'm a geologist that works for Kavango. And basically, my job entails the planning of the grade and basically grade control and all sorts of our planning operations for underground going forward. So I work basically hand in hand with Clayton.
So generally, what has been happening here, this is an old shaft that was sealed. It was closed out. So now we just want to try and open it up and resume mining operations. Basically, here we've fenced this area. So there's the strike which goes to the east and the west. So there's a series of shafts going to the east and the west. So now, but this shaft here, it was solely closed out and left out for later mining. So now we've just tried to open it up. We're trying to equip it and make sure that it's safe for underground operations. So basically, what we've done here, we've put the new headgear and we've set out some steel structures that go underground so that people can access underground safely. We've got our compressor there. That's the one that we've been using to drill to install our ladders so that people go down. And then we've got our Geology tanks ready to drill. That's where we keep our water. Then there's our compressor there, ready, an electric compressor that we're going to be using when we started production.
So I guess how deep does the mine go currently? How many levels do you guys have? What's the distance between the levels? What's the status of the underground before we go down?
Okay, so for now we have limited information concerning this shaft, but we know that this shaft it goes to second level. We have managed to equip the shaft to second level right now, and the second level, from second level going down, it was backfilled. So we're not quite sure how deep it goes, but we're hoping there's more levels that go down so that we open and start mining. So at second level, there's old workings that were done. So we're looking at cleaning and start to mine it at second level.
And then there's some history of the operations. I mean, you know, sort of the general grades, the nature of the mineralization. Can you just give an overview of what's happening underground? Maybe when they actually mine there and so on as well.
Okay, so the previous mining grades were above 10 grams a ton here. We've got information from old sections that were in pennyweights and inches that are well above 30 to 40 grams a ton in some areas. So the pay shoots are quite discrete, quite high grade, but it seems that they do have limits to their extent, so along strike. But what we have seen from an old section that we've got, which is basically the most current information, is that from like what Clayton has said, is that the bottom of the shaft has been backfilled. According to the section, there is a level that is below 2 level. That's at 275 foot, which is about 84 meters down. And that's something that we haven't accessed yet. We're still in the throes of getting the shaft fully cleaned. So currently our equipping is down to 2 levels. So 1 and 2 are completely accessible. The developments along strike are quite small though. So what we've seen is it's a testament to the actual the pay shoot extent is quite limited. However, that could open up with depth. In terms of our plans going forward though, so from an immediate perspective, where we have sampled underground, we are expecting grades that would turn around 3 to 4 grams a ton. Those are actually proven assays that we ourselves have taken. And then there's an area of material that's been barricaded that's assaying at about 1.6 to 2 grams a ton, which is probably sub-economic from the past, but it will be economic going forward. for us in particular if we can blend it efficiently. And then in terms of our own development, our plan is to develop compliant mining drives along strike, and then potentially develop stoping blocks that we can then mine out in the near term, in the next couple of weeks to couple of months.
And Clayton, in terms of the limitations of the hoisting and so on, and the compartments, how much ore do you think you could pull out of this infrastructure here per day?
In terms of production, I think because right now this is just a temporary structure for us to be able to clean up the shaft. But when we're now producing, we're looking at putting up a bigger headgear that can be able to pull about 100 tons, 80 to 100 tons a day.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the development, in terms of the number of access points underground, do you think it's possible to mine that amount of ore as well, to be able to actually pull that much ore out of the ground? Or do you think it's going to take some time to get access more levels before that can take place?
I think it's going to take time for us to be able, because the thing is, right now we're doing shaft cleaning, so we're still not yet sure. We don't know what's really down there. So we're still trying to define the resource. But if the resource is actually good, if there are more levels down there, we can actually do even more than 100 tons a day.
All right, guys, let's go down and take a look.
Sure.
Okay, so we've come down the main vertical shaft now. We're currently at second level station. What we're going to do now, just as a matter of completeness, is to walk you down to the development drive, which is on my right hand side. Obviously the bottom of the shaft, as we said, on surface is not fully exposed. We can see that there's a whole lot of muck, which is rock at the bottom, that will need to be cleared to access the mythical 3 level that we're intending to intersect down there. So for now, we'll just walk you down. We'll talk about some of the geology that we encounter on the way, take you to the end of this development that's on my right-hand side, and then Ollie will take us through some of the mining plans in the future, and Clayton will talk to us about the current situation. So behind us is quite a significant pile of waste rock that would have been dumped here. We haven't assayed this stuff yet to knowledge, so we don't really know what it's containing. It's very blocky and very large. So that'll need to be cleared, obviously, going forward when this becomes our turntable for hoisting. So the plan is to obviously have cocoa pans coming through here, rotating here, being escorted into the shaft and then hoisted from there. So we can proceed now to the face. The first thing on your left, there's an obvious cubby that would have been blasted out. Now going forward, when we do end up doing some sort of exploration, these are the sort of cubbies that we're looking at doing to basically drill out to see any sort of parallel resources that we might find. There is evidence on surface that there are some parallel structures that run to the south of our existing shaft, the shaft that we're in currently. So that's something that we could blast out and then equip with a diamond drill rig for exploration for mining.
Can I get a brief?
Yeah, looking above our heads here, you can clearly see this is what they were mining. So it's quite a dark reworked quartz, and significant, highly prone to nugget effect. But if you do look quite closely, there's evidence of dissemination within the wall rock, which obviously hence to the hydrothermal alteration that would have come through when these quartz veins deposited and emplaced. So the width of these quartz veins is quite variable. You're looking at anything from half a meter going upwards to around 1.2 meters in width, with the usual anastomosing and boudinage that you would expect from any sort of quartz-rich environment. Obviously, with regards to the floor, we have plans there just to flatten it out so we can equip it with rails so that the cocoa pan or the cars that we're using to transport ore will be traveling safely and not up and down steps. So as we come to the end of the drive, there's a muck pile as well as some old timbers, which we haven't got to the other side of yet. It's apparent though that the artisanals, we can actually hear their hoist when it's being activated. So it's been assumed that on the other side of this muck pile there's a holing from the guys that are working on the surface all the way down here, which is a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it shows strike continuity. The only bad thing is it gives them access to the working, so that's something that we have to barricade off when we eventually get going here. Clayton, have we sampled here?
Yeah, we did sample. It was an average of 2 grams per ton.
So this muck is technically economic at the moment, given that it's so close to surface. So we could hoist it. There's not too many tons here though, to be honest. But it's definitely something that we could run through the plant at some point, and just to augment our production. So can I hand over to Clayton?
So Clayton, if you describe the current kind of limitations of the development, what needs to be done to at least get started, and then maybe Ollie can explain what it will take to actually produce at upwards of 100 tons per day, which is a limitation of what you can actually hoist up.
For us to increase our production, I think we'll have to put in another headgear, whereby we were able to hoist using a cocoa pan. Because right now we're actually using the old system, the punga, the bucket system. So it's on itself, it's a limitation. So if we introduce rails and introduce cocoa pan, and then our tonnage will definitely go up.
Yeah. What you've got here, we are in what's called drive west. There is a drive east as well. So what you'll have 2 places where you can stope, and between levels is 30 meters. So if you're blasting 1 face per day, you'll get almost 90 tons out of one blast from one level to the other. So you could cycle it that you blast 1 day on the west side and 1 day on the east side, and then you'll get to your 3,000 tons per month.
And what would the geometry of the mining look like? You just showcase with your hands how it would look like.
Okay. What will happen is your stope face will look like this at 70 degrees, so that when you do blast, you drill in flat, okay, so that it breaks upwards, but it will then run down by gravity. It will run down to the bottom, and then you'll pick it up. You'll put in a box front at the bottom, that the ore goes into a box front, and then you open the box front, that it tips the ore into a cocoa pan, and off it goes. So there's no hand lashing at all involved in this. So it's quite efficient, actually.
Yeah. So if we just summarize kind of the infrastructure that needs to be put in to get to 100 tons per day here, realistically, one more hoisting system, and you need to put in carts and railways and so on, and you need to develop quite a lot.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's basically the basis of it for now. Obviously, we currently are limited with the information that we have. So the next phase of obtaining information is to do a void survey here using LiDAR, as well as an actual underground survey to place pegs in the roof, so that we can have a full understanding of actually what's been extracted and what is still available for mining. And we will repeat that process in the artisanal shafts. However, that's obviously a safety aspect that we have to consider. We can't have people working in those shafts. They're not as safe as this, for example. And then after that, we should have some sort of a resource to work from, and then we can start planning a mine properly. Yep. We are assuming a lot at the moment, but that assumption becomes less and less with the more information that we gather.
You see, here you've got almost 40 meters of drive, so we can sample this every 5 meters, and then we can say, right, that is the value that we've got, and we can tackle, if we want to, we can tackle a higher grade area first, but at least then we have information to do the mining. And the same on the west side. I mean, the east side, we haven't been there, but the east side is very much the same. It's gone quite far that way, and if we sample it, we'll have a very good idea. The only issue, as Dale mentions, is the artisanals. What have they done? We don't know that. And with a LiDAR, we can check that. It might mean we have to go to 3 level, where it's then virgin, and where it's virgin, there's no interruption at all. And then the strike you see on surface, which goes for like 400 meters, we'll have 400 meters of strike here. So a fairly long life as well, and very sustainable to do at 3,000 tons per month.
So once you've kind of dewatered and removed and gained access to a new level, how long do you think would you expect it to take to get to the end of both the western and eastern extent of the development? To just clear everything out and get ready to work.
If it's been mined before, yes. If the drives exist like this, yes. It's a matter of just cleaning them out if they've been backfilled. They won't be backfilled to the ceiling, obviously, because of the rock doesn't fill like that. If they need to be mined, you're looking at about an advance of about a meter a day in either direction, realistically. And that obviously then takes an entire block. If your block is 25 to 30 meters across, like a long strike, it'll take you about a month and some to get the strike extent developed. But then after that, you then have to develop raises vertically to link levels to then mine out the actual stope. So block defining is a very slow process, and stoping is a very fast process. So we need to be essentially in a position where our development of our heading is much further ahead than our stoping. Because otherwise then you mine yourself into a corner and then it becomes a big problem. It's a production problem.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you have to calculate your depletion rate, and then you calculate the development rate to make sure that you are creating more reserves than what you're mining. So that you get ahead of yourself, and the ideal in a place like this would be to have a 6-month development ahead of your stoping. Because there will be areas that will be unpay. So if you develop that, you can't mine unpay then until you get to the next pay stretch and so on. And then when a mine's mature, you try and have a 3-year plan, okay? But that's a mature mine. For us, I think the first target is let's get 6 months ahead.
Yeah.
Right. And then can you explain what kind of effort would have to be undertaken to get to that point?
It would require a significant labour complement going forward. The lashing crews in particular, if there's a lot of muck to lash, if it's underground then it has been backfilled. But mining wise, not significant. It would need two jackhammer operators and 2 assistants, and then their lashing complement on either side. Ideally, we would be mining these in concurrence, so blasting either end at the same time, rather than alternating. Like what Ollie was suggesting about alternating
stoping.
East and west is a stoping thing. It's production rather than development. But the costs are quite minimal there. What is expensive is the time. You can't accelerate this any faster than it can go, unfortunately. And if we end up using significantly longer drill steels to actually augment a higher blast ratio per day in terms of tonnage generated, you end up then having a limitation on what you can actually hoist. So the bottleneck right now is hoisting. And that's something that is very difficult to address with in a sort of a vertical shaft scenario. So henceforth, the requirement to have two hoisting shafts would be significantly beneficial to us, but that's something that's further down the line, as the shaft equipping of the next phase for our shaft down the road is not clearly defined yet, as we haven't finished here. However, there is a shaft that's on the west side of where we are now that does have significant grade upside. We just don't know the full extent of the developments there or the depth that the artisanals have actually mined at. It is an historic shaft, but there's a history here where the artisanals come and they destroy the shaft on the way down, because oftentimes the old-timers sunk shafts on pay, which means that to the artisanals, the shaft pillars are still very valuable, which is obviously it's damaging to our progress going forward. So that requires a significant capital outlay and planning.
Yeah, and in terms of kind of drilling or sampling and so on to gain confidence in that the stopes are not too dilutive, what's the methodology to best control for that? To ensure that the stopes are mineralized, or are you just mining out continually? How does that work?
So ideally you would diamond drill it to get some sort of proven information. That's real time. But in this sort of circumstance, given that we've got significant strike that's been exposed and mined by the artisanals and the old-timers, the proving up would just be like Ollie was suggesting, doing regular channel sampling, as well as if we had a defined face behind me, to actually to sample across the face every single day and generate assay results from that, and then you can attribute every single meter that you advance a certain grade per meter, and you do the same thing in the raises when you're raising up, when you've defined your limits of your block extent and a long strike, you do the same thing going up, and the same thing in the sub drives, which is normally at five or so meters above your main drive or below your main drive, depending on what level you're on. You would sample along there too. So those all they basically are weighted over a width, and that width then infers the block value. So it's an old way of doing resource definition, but it still does have its merits. There's operations that I've worked on before where when we were doing the depletions versus the core, they tied in very closely. So it's a proven method.
And then when you blast the rock, I mean, how visual is the higher grade stuff? Is it quite clear to kind of sort the rocks and get it straight?
Not always, because you get stringers that have high values. And as Dow mentioned, in this kind of thing you can get nugget effect, which you won't actually see, and you only find out in the plant. When your free gold comes out, then you'll see what you've got. So it's sulfides, it's all very well saying, oh, look, there's nice sulfides, but sulfides don't necessarily mean there's value. You know, so you can be fooled. That's why iron sulfides, it's called fool's gold. Okay.
But I think, yeah, so like to obviously negate the nugget effect, what we would ordinarily do is when we are sampling, like let's say a particular phase comes back with a grade of 100 grams a ton, we just determine a cut grade. So anything above, say, 10 grams a ton, we don't consider in our resource. It's something that we know it's there, but it'll positively bias the resource if you leave those values in. So it's good to know that they exist, but it's detrimental to your estimation. And like Ollie's saying, like pyrite doesn't equal gold. Unfortunately, so generally in some mines or some instances there are certain types of sulfides or pyrite, the grain size that can give you an indication of what is pay versus what's not pay. But in terms of actual grade definition, it's very difficult to tell, unless in the case of free gold where you can actually obviously see the nuggets. Then you can expect a high value, but generally you can't. But the gold is not visible per se. It's nuggety but not visible.
All right. Is there something else we want to cover?
Not that I can think of. I think in terms of like grade control, it's much of the same. We will be mining, exposing the footwall contact, keeping the hanging wall unexposed until such a time when we come to do stope preparation for sliping, so that then becomes the guide for the miner. And sampling, we would sample every single lithology across a face. So if there's 4 or 5, they're sampled independently of each other, and then those grades are weighted accordingly when we're doing any sort of controls.
So let's say if capital is not a limitation, if Kavango decides to capitalize this, what kind of time would be required, if time was the only constraint to actually, let's say labor is not a constraint, you get the guys, you get the capital, what would it take to get up to that 100 ton per day level? I mean, how much time would you require from now?
Well, if you're sinking, you can do about 20 meters per month. If you're sinking and you're driving, you also do 20 meters per month. Right. So if we find that the artisanals have mined out too much, we will have to go down one level. So I would say, and then you have to develop, I would say certainly between 3 and 6 months before you can say, right, you've got a proper block, and you can then do sustainable mining at 3,000 tons per month.
Yeah, I think he's right. The top end is 6 months.
Yeah.
If you're realistic. I mean, like you said, if capital's not an option, or labour, etc., that your constraint would be time, and that'll be about 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last thing we want to do here is rush into
and not do it properly.
That we might ourselves down a hole. Yeah.
And do you guys have a sense of kind of a ballpark, or at least a cap on what it would cost to get to that stage, or some kind of capital? I mean, you need another shaft, you need to develop quite a bit.
Well, shaft sinking is about $1,100 per meter, ballpark number. Your development number is in the order of $300 a meter. Yeah. So you can work it out and say, guess what, if you want to go one level down, and as I said before, if you go a level down, you want to go a bit further so you can have a loading box to make it efficient. So you're talking about, 40 to 50 meters, plus the ore pass, it makes it like 60 meters of shaft sinking, so that's like in the order of $65,000. And then your development, if you want to get your 3 months ahead, it's going to be, say, 60 meters either side, maybe 80 meters either side if you're leaving pillars as well. So you're talking about 160 meters lateral, okay, at, say, 300, that gives you, $500,000. And then you do your raises, which are going to be 30 meters on both sides, and that's where you are. So ballpark number will be in the order of $600,000.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Yeah.
And let's say $1 million. You need to put in some, but it will make sense. It will make economic sense for sure.
Yeah, $1 million is, again, that's a good number to work with. I mean, there's other things we have to consider, like equipping the drives, etc. And obviously the wage bill, etc. I mean, that's normally built into your development cost, but if not, then that's something that we need to add in. But that's something that we are developing. What stifled that for now is we need to define the resource as best as we can, so we can actually plan the mine because you can't plan a mine where you don't know what you can mine. I mean, we can hypothetically throw numbers around of what we think might be there, but until we know for sure, we don't want to give a mining plan to anybody that then they come back and say, well, what you guys said is not actually reality. So for now, it's very inferred. Our information is very inferred by historic versus what we just eyeball here.
Look, the other thing is, this is also quite new. I mean, there's not extensive mining here. At the bottom will be virgin, so we can actually get to more modern equipment, if you want to call it equipment, okay, and not do the old hand-got stuff. So we can look at electro-hydraulic machines which drill at a meter a minute versus the machines now, which takes like 7 minutes, to drill a hole. You know, so we can do all those kind of things and make it super efficient. It's not difficult to do. And if we want to do high-speed development, we can. All we have to do is make sure that we have the ventilation conditions laid down. And then we can talk about 40 meters advance per month if you want to go that route. You know, and it's not that much more expensive either.
No.
It's very labor efficient to do that, but again, as Dale says, once we know what we've got, then we can start making these calls. But up until then, I'd be very guarded to say, what can we do? But options are there.
Yeah.
And what kind of grades do you feel like you would have to be able to pull out on average for this to make sense?
To be realistic, like three and a half.
Yeah.
Somewhere there.
Look, I know of an operation that's running now, and they're doing 3,000 tons a month, and they're recovering 6 kilos a month, and they're making a very good margin. They're making a margin of about $350,000 a month.
That's 2 grams per ton then?
That's 2 grand recovered. Recovered. Yeah.
But what we've done here, we've actually did chip sampling, which is not the most efficient way of doing things. But the average grade here is about 3 grams per ton.
Yeah.
Which gives us more confidence.
Yeah.
And obviously, that will reduce.
Yeah.
As we, because there's losses in, you got a shaft core factor, and then a plant core factor. These are all the inefficiencies of a system. But 3 is a good number to work with. If that's our actual mining grade. If you can extract 2, that's perfect.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, if we're saying 3 grams a ton in situ, and you're only recovering 2, that's quite poor.
Yeah,
because it's only 66%. You know what I mean? So, and I would say that in general here, recoveries are in the order of 85 to 90%.
90%.
So, yeah, if we recover 2.5, even better.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's an exciting prospect, and I really think that it just needs to be done correctly, and it'll fly properly.
Yeah. And as we heard, there are some historical precedents for very high grade mining as well, but that's very selective, those guys back in the day. But there is potential for that as well.
Well, I can tell you in the old days, the pay limit, as they call it, was 8 grams per ton. So you would not mine anything less than 8 grams per ton, okay? Whereas with us now, we're saying the pay limit will be about 1.5. So anything above 1.5 is payable to us. And obviously, if we can settle around 3 to 3.5, it'll be very good.
Yeah. That's all inferred by the gold price.
Yeah.
And the current prices are extremely high, so it manifests itself in a very low mining grade. So basically, for now, we've come down the eastern drive, but it's about the same extent as the west. We're standing at the mouth of a crosscut whose supports have collapsed. We've sampled the material that's on the left-hand side, that's in front of Ollie and Clayton there. It's assayed at 2.5 grams a ton, so the muck is paying. We can't see too much in terms of the geology on the face. That's all covered by calcified material from being underwater all these years, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but this was definitely a mining face that they were developing along at some point. Can't really figure out the direction they were going. I mean, these sockets indicate that direction, but they seem to have blasted this out too. Obviously, it's a testament to the nature of the reef and how these ore bodies are anastomose and travel underground. So this is another end that we can potentially mine. So we'll have the west side and the east side basically going at the same time, and then we need to figure out our plan here for this material. More than likely going to hoist it out. So for 2 reasons: to clean it, but also if it's containing gold, then obviously there's an upside there. We're yet to discover what's on the other side there, so it's quite exciting from that standpoint too. And this is probably the first time that people have been down here in years with any sort of mechanical knowledge as we do.
Okay, before we head out into the field and have a look at these things, we should probably just give you a quick rundown of the setting with the published geological map. This is the published geological map of the Philabouzi Greenstone Belt, which you can see in the central part of the map here, and it's surrounded by younger granites in pink, and we're focusing in on this little intrusive here, which is known as the Balmoral Stock. It's a high level intrusive, and I don't know if you can see, but it's got roof pendants of greenstone material sitting in it. And that is quite unusual in the area because it's full of historical mines that were working on quartz veins, the largest of which was Bill's Luck, which was 17,000 ounces at 7.7 recovered grade. We've got a large shear zone running down the centre of the greenstone belt here, which runs alongside the Balmoral Stock, and that's the setting we've got. It's analogous to one of the settings that Groves has put down, a common setting that Groves has mentioned in his recent book, and you can see here a granite intrusive with a shear zone with an irregular contact, the shear zone running along the side here, and at the pressure release points you're getting your mineralisation. So the other thing we'd like to show you before we disappear out into the field is some of the geophysics that's been done on the project.
Today we're going to talk about some of the Hillside projects. Hillside's quite close to my heart because I've got 30 years experience in gold prospecting. I've worked on 2 feasibility studies that are currently in production, and out of all the history I've had with gold production, I believe Zimbabwe is one of the most underexplored, underdeveloped areas, and that's why I believe there's a lot of potential here at Hillside. So looking on the screen, we have the Hillside project outlined, and we've got a number of prospects here. We've got prospect 1 over here, prospect 2 over here, prospect 3 over here. So let's dive in straight away to prospect 1. Okay, so this is a cross section through the prospect 1, or Bill's Luck project, that we've got within the Hillside. We've got 3 holes currently drilled here. We've got borehole 1, borehole 2, borehole 3. We're going to be drilling a 4th borehole. The idea of these boreholes is to intersect this set of workings, which is an old mine working called Bill's Luck, and there's artisanal workings underneath here. If I rotate it up, you can actually see these are the workings down here, and these workings relate to these IP chargeability features. So the idea is to drill the holes from here into the chargeability anomalies to test whether there's any gold associated with these, because we know there is at surface. And then this hole over here, 3, was to test these artisanal workings, and this much broader IP chargeability anomaly over here. These are the gold values that we've managed to get so far from these holes. As you can see, these are cut at 10 grams. So we've had intersections all the way through here, and these intersections further down here. So these intersections up here tie into these workings. These intersections tie into something that comes up through here, which the artisanal workers haven't found. And this artisanal working that comes down through here is what we've intersected in these workings here. If I zoom back out, we haven't got any results back for this hole, but we're expecting to get some good intersections underneath these artisanal workings over here, and some more underneath these artisanal workings, which relates to this chargeability anomaly, and then this broader chargeability anomaly down here. What you're probably thinking is, what are these features up here? These are the old Bill's Luck mine dumps, and the dumps, as usual, sit right over one of the most interesting anomalies in the whole of the Bill's Luck area. Nobody's ever worked it because it's under the dumps. So that's why we're planning another borehole from here coming down through this main chargeability anomaly down here. So that's a quick summary of Bill's Luck.
Yeah, I'm standing on the old tailings dump at Prospect 1 of the Hillside, and behind me you can see the stamp milling setup. We're actually on the southern boundary of a small high-level diorite intrusive. We've got metasediments to our south, the diorite to the north. And to the north of us, we've got Prospect 3 and Prospect 2, which we'll look at later. The old mine here was produced before the Second World War, just a little bit afterwards. Did 17,000 ounces at about 7.7 average recovered grade from an anastomosing system of quartz veins. That mine, we'll have a look at later, runs along the top of this ridge here, where you can see some of the artisanal workings. And then later, in fact only about 5 years ago, the artisanal workers discovered a splay which comes down this valley, and you can see quite a considerable number of workings running along the valley. There was some very high grade material coming out from there. So we've drilled, we've drilled 2 holes under the main workings. We didn't get very good grades in the first hole. We probably drilled through a pinch. So, but we're planning. Well, we're already working down to get down the shaft to start doing some mining in the old mine itself. Okay, I was talking to you a few minutes ago from the top of the old Slimes Dam over there, about 100 meters to the south of us. We've now come up onto the ridge, and behind me is the old main shaft for the historical mine workings, which is just being recommissioned now. What we're going to do is just walk along the ridge, along some of the workings, it was worked historically, as I said, 17,000 ounces, about 7.7 recovered grade, in an anastomosing quartz vein system. Artisanal workers have been busy on this, contract miners have been busy on this for some time as well. There's approximately 400 meters plus of strike, but we'll just walk along a little bit and give you some idea of the style of the workings. You can see the windlasses here. Each of these areas has been divided up into separate contract miners. They've got a contract with the guys that were previously operating here, which Kavango has taken over. They're contracted to mine. They take their material to the stamp mill. They take the free gold. They pay a milling cost, and the sands are retained by Kavango for cyanide treatment. But obviously Kavango is now, as I said, recommissioning this shaft to start mining in its own right. So that's why these areas are all fenced individually. They should be fenced anyway for safety purposes. So we'll try and walk around it without killing ourselves on the barbed wire. Actually, this illustrates things quite nicely. What you can see here is pinch and a swell, and then you've got a division of the quartz veins into 2 directions there. It's branching out, so it's an anastomosing system. And the way they mined it historically was typically of the Rhodesian times. They just sunk any number of shafts along strike. Prospecting through shaft sinking was their modus operandi rather than drilling. Behind me here are the foundations for the milling site. And down this valley, you can see, we'll walk down in a minute, is a series of artisanal workings, which is a recent discovery, and it's a splay from the main ore body. So this was discovered about 5 years ago. Just goes to show what a really good exploration tool artisanal miners are, if they're used in the right way. So we'll just take a wander through here and give you some idea of the extent of it. I'm standing more or less on the site of our initial scoping hole, which was planned to go through the splay and then through, you can see up on the ridge there, you can see the cut through the old main zone. Unfortunately, this hole appears to have gone through a pinch, where these systems are often pinching and swelling, and we didn't get particularly good results from this one, but it was just a scoping hole. I remember when the guys first started these shafts here, they were pulling out some very nice quartz veins, probably about 50 centimeters to a meter in width, often with pyrite and a considerable amount of galena. It's quite common in this neck of the woods when you get very high grade gold, when you get galena. Some of the samples were running at about 30 grams per tonne. So we certainly need to do some more drilling under this zone in the near future. I guess here you can see a pinch and swell nature of the ore body. It's also anastomosing, so it breaks off in different directions and rejoins. So it's a bit of a, certainly with a scoping hole, we just got a bit unlucky to hit a pinch zone. But I don't think we need to walk any further down here, but you can see the workings continue for another 50 or 60 metres along strike. We'll put the drone up and fly over it a bit later on.
Okay, so now we've looked at Bill's Luck 1 with the dumps over there, the borehole here, and another borehole to go back under the dumps. Let's move on to area Prospect 2. Prospect 2 is this area, Britain up here. We'll do a quick look at a cross-section through here. Okay, so this is a cross-section through Britain where we've actually drilled some boreholes. This cross-section actually shows Britain over here, Prospect 2, and night shift area, Prospect 3, on the one section. But if we zoom into just Britain, you'll be able to see that there's a whole series of workings all along through here. These are artisanal workings and old mine workings, and they sit underneath this chargeability anomaly here. There's a few scattered workings over here which sit under this chargeable anomaly, and then we've got a broad IP chargeability anomaly down here. And you can see from the boreholes that we've drilled, if I rotate them round, we've got a whole series of intersections in this hole through here, some scattered intersections through here, and these all tie into the artisanal workings that are related to this high chargeability anomaly. We've got more intersections further down dip and another big intersection down here. And it's more than likely that this high intersection up here runs down and joins in with this high, and it's running in the plane of the computer screen that way, running through there, and picks up in this one over here. What we haven't done so far is planned any boreholes over this chargeability anomaly or this chargeability anomaly. So there's lots of scope for increasing the amount of grade and tonnage across this whole zone at Britain.
And we're sitting at Prospect 2, and we're sitting where the old historical mine was. We'll look down in the mine in a minute, but you can actually see some of the old drives going off into the sidewalls here, which has subsequently been opened up by the artisanals. So as I mentioned before, we're sitting on the northern boundary structure, and we're sitting within a roof pendant of biotite schist within in the diorite, and we'll walk through the workings in a minute. Again, there's about 300 meters of strike, and over a width of about 100 meters or so, there's a whole series of workings being opened up by the artisanals. And we can have a look, some of them up to 15 meters wide, and we can have a look at those. We've drilled 3 holes, one of which comes underneath this mine, along strike here, to test under the artisanal workings.
So this mine, Steve, I mean, do you have some information about what it used to produce and what kind of grades and so on?
It was producing in the 1930s at a grade of about 10 grams per tonne average recovered grade.
How deep did it go?
We don't know, probably about 35, 40 meters.
And do you have a sense of the strike they were mining? How far?
There's a dump, there's an old tailings dump on the other side here, about 200 meters away. We don't know, we haven't got maps of the old workings here.
تصور في قصاها الزوان والأولاد كل حياة الزوان والأولاد كل حياة.
So now we are about 100 meters from the mine that you saw. We want to walk again across the strike just to show and appreciate the amount of artisanal workings here. So follow me, I'll show you. Right where I'm standing at the moment, if you look to my right, you can see those heaps. That's an old tailings dump, and closer to that old tailings dump, it looks like there was a stamp mill over there. Right, so what you can see here, these are sort of prospecting trenches that were done by the artisanals along the strike. So here they are very shallow, not very deep, but you will see as we go across, they get deeper and deeper. What you can see here, it's an old pit with some shafts within it, quite deep. I cannot see the bottom of it, and it's now overgrown. This one here is an artisanal shaft. You can actually see the windlass here, and the workings, whatever they are targeting, is going east-west, as you can see. Now we have what looks like a shaft here, very deep again, more than 10 meters wide. And also to my left, you can actually see that these are sort of parallels being worked, separated by about 5 meters. Very close together. Looks like we have got very serious artisanal mining here. These pits were being mined along the strike. I cannot actually see the bottom. It's quite deep. The rock, host rock here, it's the diorite that we've been seeing all over. Here we've got a very deep pit, very dark inside. You can actually see some. It's a platform from the artisanals, and also some sort of drives going north as well as going south. Looks like they were following a shearing, a very narrow shear, not very narrow, but it looks like it's like pinching and swelling. What we have here is an active artisanal shaft that is linked to this sort of open stop, and then you can actually hear a jackhammer below. Yeah, so they are actually drilling there. So this shaft links to this stop. So this is the shaft that they use for hauling out their ore. This here is the biggest artisanal working that we have seen today, and it looks like it links to the old mine further to the east of where we are standing at the moment. You can see how deep it is. Also very active, as you can see by those platforms that have been installed by the artisanal workers. So this is the point from which they take out their ore. It looks like they have a shaft going deeper into the workings.
Dennis, I've just counted up as we've walked through here. We've walked about 100 meters through the strike, and I've counted up at least 11 zones. And even between these bigger, wider zones, there are shafts that are being sunk, as you can see over there. So there's lots of potential here for bulking the thing, for bulking the mineralisation up. Here we can see again, you've got the old tailings dump sitting on the top.
And what I've also seen is these guys, they are only mining part of sort of the shear zone or the shear system that you are following. So it means if we assemble across the whole strike, maybe we can get something there.
Good. Absolutely.
Hi there, welcome back. We're now going to be going through prospects 1, 2 and 3, and we'll break it up in sections. As you can see here, the prospect is over here. On the geological map, it's on the boundaries between the granites and the greenstone belts. It also follows along the shear zone that's running through. So on the main, so you can see the shear zone coming through, and our prospects are just off it towards the north side of it. Okay, in this area here, they have mined out previously about 17,000 ounces of gold, which is pretty impressive, and they've also blocked out some places where there's tungsten in it. Okay, so what we've done in our area here, we've mapped out all the artisanal workings. All the red here is all the workings on surface that the guys are basically digging up. Now this is all very shallow, right to the surface. We have also done geophysics and field work, and we've decided to drill through the 3 different areas. So we're now looking at Prospect 2. Prospect 2, as you can see, has got quite a width coming through it, and we've got all these sub-parallel structures running through, dipping towards the northeast. And we're going to go take a look at that now. Okay, so in Prospect 2, what we have is mostly the metasediments on surface, and we go down to diorites as we go further in. We also have some major deformation zones where you get schist and a few other shear zones of interest. Let's go take a look. So we're starting up here. This is metasediment, and you can see almost as you jump over, you've got your diorite. As we go further down, this is our high deformation zone. So it starts off with a quartz vein coming through, and we get this major deformation, which we're calling a schist. And we end up with another quartz vein on the other side, with a little bit of schist here, but then it starts going back to the diorites. So in this here, this is in total 7 meters. We're averaging around 10.7 grams per ton. So this is really interesting. Most of it, as you can see, are quite over 1 gram per ton. There's a few places where it's just a little bit under, but our biggest one is right at the bottom here on the edges of this quartz vein. We got 84 grams per ton on this short area. The depth here is basically at 51 meters, so this is quite close to surface. It should be fairly easy to get to, and we're looking to see if there's an extent towards it. Now we'll continue with the diorites coming down. And in this point here, we get shearing coming through, right? And as you can see on the far side there, we got 2 meters here of averaging around 2.1 grams per ton. It's a small zone, but is of interest. This is a depth of 86 meters. We've also got another small zone a bit further down. It's also not particularly large. It's also about 1 meter in depth and in width, starting from here to here, on average of about just under 1 gram per ton. Now what we're seeing here is that we're seeing a lot of small shear zones coming through. We don't have anything over 1 gram as we go down, but there is these small little bits that show interest. One interesting thing, a bit unexpected, but we did find right at the bottom of our hole, over this side here, at about 307 meters. Can you wait through here? we've got this massive sulfide coming through. Now, as you go towards the top, you get these fine-grained nickel sulfides, and then you get to a point here where it's about 10 centimeters of really concentrated sulfides coming through. So this is about 5% nickel and 1% copper. We haven't really figured out how far it extends. It's one of the things we're going to be looking at, but it is quite a depth, about 307 meters.
Okay, so we're moving back to the map of Hillside, Prospect 1, Prospect 2 Britain, Prospect 3. This is the night shift prospect. So let's have a quick look at this prospect. Okay, so here we've taken a section through the night shift prospect, and these are the 3 holes that we've drilled at night shift. Again, if I rotate it down, you can see a whole series of artisanal workings and old mine workings that come through here. These artisanal workings all relate to IP chargeability anomalies that come down through here and a broader anomaly at depth. The idea, we drilled 3 scoping holes through here to test for continuity of grade across the whole width of the zone, as well as down dip with the zone. And this has been quite successful because, as you can see, as I rotate it around, we've had lots of high-grade intersections all the way through here, all the way down, meaning most of this zone across here probably carries some gold grade, and it could, at the end of the day, turn out to be something that's open pittable or bulk mineable.
So we've come over to Prospect 3, where you can see the drill rig in the background. We're currently drilling the 3rd of 3 holes on this target area to test the zone where we intersected about 40 metres, running at around about half a gram a tonne on the first hole. Steve?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, what we've got here, we've got a little, there was an artisanal, historical working about 300 or 400 metres away from us along strike. There's, and subsequent to that, the artisanal miners have opened up probably 15 or 20 zones, parallel zones, along about 600 metres of strike. Now, this is the 3rd hole to test, to drill into those zones, or drill through those zones to see what we've got. That's it.
And Ben, just give some context on who you're partnering with doing the drilling. I know you have these guys over in Botswana as well. Can you tell, how it's been going, and maybe you can give some parameters around, assay lab time and so on, and also the drilling cost per meter?
So we're working with Equity Drilling Zimbabwe. We've got a long-established relationship with Equity Drilling, and Kavango has recently invested into their Zimbabwe arm to take a 45% stake in the company. So we now own 45% of this rig. Part of our mission in Zimbabwe is we're looking to help develop the country's supply chain for exploration. That doesn't exist really at the moment. So in making the investment into Equity Drilling, we're hoping that will bring more modern drilling standards to Zimbabwe, where there are already quite sophisticated operators working in this country. It really speaks as well to the amount of opportunity that there is here. There is going to be an enormous amount of drilling that's required over the coming years for Zimbabwe to fulfill its potential. Now, our drilling costs in this part of the world are cheaper than we face in Botswana. In Bots, it's much more challenging terrain and more difficult to drill. Here we're running at around about $190 a metre, which is all in an oriented core. We're very, very happy working with Equity Drilling. These guys have serviced us extremely well. We've currently drilled about 6,000 metres into the project. Once we've got the samples up, we then ship those over for fire assay testing in Harare, and then we send the pulps from the assay tests in Harare to ALS in Johannesburg. We've worked very closely with Johannesburg for a number of years, and we have a specially granted license from the Ministry of Mines to export our samples. Long term, we're looking to try to bring Zimbabwe's first internationally accredited laboratory into the country. We are in quite advanced discussions with a number of potential providers. And again, this speaks to our mission, part of our business plan, which is building up Zimbabwe's exploration supply chain.
So what we have here is today's core. From today's drilling, what you can see, these marks, these are meter marks. So this 169 represents the depth of the wall, and the arrows, they show the downward direction of our drilling. At the end of this, there's something that looks interesting. We have some sulfides within a shear zone here. You can actually see that it's mineralized. This shear zone, it's mineralized with pyrite, and you can appreciate, if you look closely, you can appreciate the fabric on this core, as well as a bit of chlorite alteration here. So I can't wait to see what sort of results we'll get from here.
Okay, earlier when we were at the drill site, I was talking about some historical artisanal workings. Now you can see those up here on the top of the hill. This was in fact started as a tungsten mine years ago, and when I first came to this prospect about 10-12 years ago, there were just a few artisanal workers here. The artisanals have obviously been mining gold, not tungsten, and as you can see looking up the hill here, they've now expanded their operations. There are multiple zones, multiple parallel zones and some cross-cutting zones running up the hill, and this is now continuous in that direction, well both directions, but mainly in that direction for about 600 meters. So we feel there's potential here for mining these zones together, for them to bulk up and to a potential open pit. So that's what we're exploring for. Just to give you a little bit of setting here, if you can see to the north of us, we've got a younger granite. We're actually standing on the edge of a high-level intrusive. It's a granite diorite, and it's got large roof pendants of biotite schist in it. We've got a shear system running through it. There's a bounding shear to the north of us where we're going to see Prospect 2. We're on the southern bounding shear at Prospect 3, and there are a number of connecting shears running between the two of those as well, which we'll have a look at a bit later. And you'll see during the flight just how extensive the artisanal workings are along strike here.
Okay, so now we are going to walk across the strike of the workings and show you the extent of the artisanal workings around here. And if you check in the background there, you can actually appreciate the active artisanal mining going on. You can also see the sort of alluvial workings where the artisanal miners have been mining through the rubble. So now let's walk across the strike. So here you can see some of the workings. They are very shallow. Looks like someone was working almost a 10 centimeter wide, probably quartz vein, and the workings, they don't go much into the bedrock here. Yeah, the amount of quartz rubble here shows that there's a lot of quartz, probably a result of a series of quartz veins that had the gold. So as you can see here, the workings are striking sort of east-west, about 0.5 meter wide workings, not very deep, probably a meter from the surface. Here again we can see the workings across the strike, and the dip, it's showing that whatever they've been mined here, it's dipping to the north and running almost east-west. Here the workings look a little bit deeper, more than 3 meters deep from what I can see here. On either side of where I'm standing at the moment, You can actually see the workings, and to my right there's a hand winch, a windlass that they use to pull out ore from underground. Quite deep as well. I cannot see the bottom from where I am standing at the moment. So this shows that this is not just superficial enrichment of gold, but it actually goes deeper. This here goes down to about 4 meters. Not very wide or extensive. It's a shallow working, striking east-west. Another east-west striking working here, quite narrow, about 0.5 meters wide. Yeah. The depth is around 5 meters here. You can actually see some of the workings extending to the east, but not very large workings. This is quite big, more than 10 meters in depth, and you can see it is timbered here, though in a rudimentary way. Yeah, I think this is where they used to pull the ore from. They probably had something like a windlass. The workings here, they extend to maybe 30 meters to my right there. About between 0.5 and 1 meters in width, dipping to the north. To my left here, where my brothers are working there, it looks like an extension of my previous station there. So they are actively mining at the moment. Looks like they've gone deeper, that's why they are using that winch to pull out their ore. Something narrow but very shallow. Probably it was a quartz vein, or they were following a very narrow shear here. Very steep dipping. Extending on either side of where I'm standing, we've got these workings. At this point, immediately to my right, looks like it's about 1.5 meter wide, and it's dipping to the north as well. Further east of where I'm standing, it looks like there are some active mining activities going on. Artisanals, they've got a windlass there, and there's a road which looks like they are actively getting ore from there, transporting ore from there.
Blasting.
Yeah, so what you can hear in the background is artisanal blasting. Not far from where we are standing at the moment.
So Dennis, I've just walked through, and as we've been walking through and counted up, and I've counted 12 zones over about 150 meters of width, including these two zones here, which are only 4 or 5 meters apart. Now, many of these zones are offset, some are bifurcating, and we're not sure if the artisanals have discovered all of them. So that's why we're actually drilling through the whole package. And if you turn to the north there, you can actually see the drill rig. We're drilling under this series of workings as we speak.
Welcome back. Now I'm going to be looking at Prospect 3. So we previously spoke about 1, 2 and 3. Just a reminder, it's on the contact between the younger intrusive granites into the metasediment, into the greenstone belt, and we've got a shear zone running through. Prospect 3 is basically over here. Now, this map doesn't show well, so we'll come across to here. As you can see, there's a wide range, width-wise, of a lot of these tiny little structures running through that are being mined out. What we're looking at here is to see the extent of this below the ground and if it's worth mining. So let's go take a look. Okay, starting on the top, we're looking at mostly diorites, and then as we get further down, we start getting into the metasediments. Now, the metasediments, as we go further down, actually show some garnets in there as well, which is quite interesting. So let's take a look. So our first zone, as you come through here, this is a depth of 97 meters. It runs for about 5 meters, and we're averaging out at 1.6 grams per ton. So we do have charcoal pyrites and pyrites running through here, along with shearing occurring. So our highest grades are around about 2.3, and our lowest is about 0.79. They do have some quartz veining coming through as well, which is probably one of the indicators we're looking at. Now, in these zones here, we have a lot of these narrow zones with gold in it, and they're interspaced all the way through. So you'll see little bits here, and then it'll jump down. So from here, you can see it almost steps out a tiny bit where you got nothing, and then we go back to a small zone of mineralization where you get gold again. We also still see some quartz veining, but shearing going along, and sulfide. So we got 1.2 and 0.8. So this is about a meter wide, and it's averaging around 0.9 grams. Let's continue down. So as we can see through, we go through all these things. Here's another meter mark, 1 meter at 2.49 grams. So we start seeing tiny little zones all the way through. Now, if you remember on the map, there's a lot of these artisanal workings on the surface. These are what we're hitting as we're going down. So these are of interest, especially when you're looking at the bigger picture. Again, small zones, 2 meters wide, just over a gram per ton. Now, here's the metasediment, and we've got the garnets coming through. We still, as you see, it's quite pretty colors. And then we've got a small zone here of 2.14 grams per ton. Again, small, tiny zones running all the way through. Okay. Now, also within these garnet zones and the metasediments, we actually have small zones of banded iron also within it, which is of an interest to us as well, because they could be indicators of traps for the gold. I think that's about it for this one.
Okay, so looking at the Hillside area, it includes Prospect 1, Prospect 2, Prospect 3, and Prospect 4. Prospect 4 is about 12 kilometers away to the north of the main Hillside area. So this is Prospect 4, what we call Steenbok area. We'll zoom into Prospect 4. So this is the Prospect 4 area. And as you can see, we've done some lines of IP. We've also planned out some drill holes. We've completed one drill hole. There's a whole series of structures that come through here and come through here. And there's lots of old artisanal workings that are highlighted by the grey areas. If we actually just do a cross section through here, here you can actually see the artisanal workings all up on the hillside, all through here. And they relate to this IP chargeability anomaly, this one that extends to depth, and this one down here. If I load on the assays for this, you can see that this hole was very good. We've intersected a lot of low-grade gold all the way through with some high-grade values at various depths relating to this IP structure and this IP structure. We've got a series of 3 or 4 other boreholes that are intending to drill through these other IP chargeability anomalies to test those as well.
Okay, welcome back. We are now at Prospect 4, and of course we saved the best for last. Okay, so we're going to give you a general overview of the geology here. So, as you can see in the background, we have younger intrusive granites. They're from the Archean age, and they bring themselves down into the gneiss, a felsic gneiss that then, as you go further south, moves into metasediments. Okay, now this area here has 2 major shear zones that are coming through. So we go from the northwest down to the southeast is the Irisvale-Lancaster shear zone, And we've got another one, the Cleavage Divide, which goes from the northeast down to the southwest. This shows up in our lithologies that we're looking at. So in our areas here, we're seeing most of the mineralization is found within the shear fabric of the Irisale Lancaster, and also in the quartz veining that comes through from the Cleavage Divide. Now, one of the things that makes this area quite interesting is, besides a lot of artisanal miners, we do have an old mine, historically, that has produced about 5,000 ounces over a very short period, of 11 grams per ton as an average. So we're going to go further down and take a look at the workings, and we'll talk about more down there. Cheers.
Well, we are at Prospect 4, where I'll be taking you across the strike just to show the artisanal workings that we have here. Basically, the workings are striking southwest, northeast, as you can see here. This is sort of a shallow working, although it has been abandoned, but for artisanal mining, it looks like they were getting something here. This confirms that there's probably gold here. Well, this here looks like an old exploration trench, though it's very shallow, but at least it's cutting across our strike. So it's probably an old, overgrown exploration trench. Yeah, here we've got some workings, artisanal workings, dipping to the south, quite steep, around 65-70 degrees, striking southwest, northeast. Yeah, we are now approaching very active artisanal mining shafts here. As you can see, this is the ore that they've been pulling out. If you look closely, you can appreciate the sulfides that are on some of the rocks. This is our felsic gneiss. Yeah, what we are seeing here is deep by artisanal standards. You can see it's like an open stoop that they've been mining. There's also a winch that they are using to pull out their ore, also striking the same direction as our main structures here, southwest, northeast. It extends to here where they have a second hand winch, very deep. Let's cross over to another parallel another parallel structure that they are mining. That's parallel to what we have seen. Yeah, it looks like the structure was a little bit wider. It's around 1.8 meters in width, though it shows sort of pinching and swelling. It gets narrower as you go to the west. You can hear the sound of the jackhammer in the background, so they are actively mining here.
Okay, so you've seen artisanal workings. Now we're going to describe why we drilled here. Okay, so behind me on that side there is an old historical mine. It follows along the same strike of our structures that we're looking into. Our geophysics have pointed out there's at least 4 shear zones running through here, including the artisanal mines and historical mines. We decided to put a hole here to try intersect all 4 of those shear zones, artisanal mines, and try intersect at depth and at certain near surface the gold mineralization. So we drilled here and we got some good results. We'll talk to you about that when we get back to the camp. Okay, welcome back. We're on to our last prospect. Our last prospect is sitting up here. Now, on the geological map, you can see there's a granite intruding in, and there's a contact between the granite and the greenstones. If you take a look over here, this is an interpretation from the geophysics that we can see. So there's a lot of structures happening on the area. And what we've done is we've planned a drill hole coming up through it to see if there's anything within those zones there. And historically, there's been some soil sampling areas that have been of interest to us. Now, what they've done in this area here, they've mined out about 5,000, just under 5,000 grams at 11 grams per ton. So this zone is quite narrow, high grade zone. And we'll talk about our results. Let's go take a look. As you can see, compared to the other projects and prospects, we don't have very much soil on surface. We almost went directly into rock. Now these rocks are felsic and gneisses, and pretty much what we see here, which is quite a pretty one. So these are probably around about the Archean age, and we're going to go down a bit to take a look at our grades. Okay, so we're down here, around about 95 meters going down, well, from 97 to 98. We now have our first visible gold. One of our geologists found this here, and if you can see in there, that is one of the visible gold pieces that he found. So as you can see coming through here, obviously with the visible gold, it's a short distance, right? But we got just over 200 grams per ton. So it's pretty damn good. Now, there's a small zone here where we got very little results, and then we got another quartz veining coming through, and this one here is about a meter long, and we get 1.09 grams per ton. So again, very narrow, very high grade gold that we can see inside our zones here. We do have small little bits coming through, but our next interesting zone is down here at the bottom. So as you go through, you can start seeing our markings here. We're starting to see a lot more sulfides being shown up, pyrites, charcoal pyrites, as you're coming through. And now here's our next zone. This is at 214 meters. These two zones here, so you got a lot of silica coming through into the gneiss, and here we've got just over 1.3 meters with an average of 1.86 grams per ton. There is some fabric of shearing coming through, but this is of it's quite interesting nonetheless. Okay, that's it for us.
Okay, so I'm currently standing on the edge of one of the open pits that was mined by Clough back towards the end of last century. There are three pits here. This is the Peachtree pit, then it goes on to the Balmoral pit, and then there's a slight faulted offset to the Mickey pit. So this is on the same strike direction as we've looked at across at Hillside. We're probably about 2 kilometers along strike to Hillside, but there are two faults between us and between Hillside and here. On the other side of the pit here, I don't know if you can see it, you can see some secondary copper sweating out of the sidewalls, right next to a cross-cutting structure. So really, all of this just goes to show that there's certainly potential for open pit mining here, and we believe that we will find some over at Hillside. In a few minutes, well, just now you're going to see, we'll try and fly along the strike here to give you some idea of the size of this ore body.
All right, so we've been through Hillside, we've been underground just now. Previously we saw the entire current operations with the processing and so on. And now we're here with Ben again to kind of let him summarize what he thinks of the operations as of now, and then we'll talk about the next steps.
So as you've seen, this is a project that we've talked a lot about that has significant exploration upside. This is a project which has never been tested using modern exploration technologies or methods, but has significant potential for large-scale gold, both near surface and underground. So the exploration project in itself is a fantastic one, but what we also have is the potential for near-term, quite significant revenue. You've seen the current operations. You can see how we can upgrade those current operations using more modern methods, sort of improving on what's already being done throughout Zimbabwe. But beyond that, we want to introduce international standards, international mining practices, really to accelerate this project's growth. So within this 440 hectare block, which in the grand scheme of things is really very small, for me this encapsulates a lot of the opportunity that exists in Zimbabwe today. We knew where to look thanks to all the work that had been done by the artisanals recently and the historic high-grade mining. We have a population centre that is here to work. We have the infrastructure, the roads, the power structure. You've seen how easy it is to navigate around here and how well welcomed we've been by everybody that we come across. And for us, this 440 hectare project, it encapsulates what's possible in modern Zimbabwe.
And just kind of crystallize people, what kind of approximate sort of gold production do you get right now out of this place? As we've seen, this is a very proprietary operation. It's old school. There's obvious improvements that everyone can see, but that's not the main point right now. But what is it sitting at currently, just for interest?
So you're absolutely right. We're using technology at the moment, these stamp mills that we can hear in the background that were invented 130 years ago. And again, we see this throughout Zimbabwe, use of this old school technology that is nowhere near sort of what's happening internationally. Current production stands at around about 1.5 kilos a month. So we're generating just over $100,000 a month from revenue. This is from a standing start back in March. And again, it illustrates sort of what is possible here very, very quickly in Zimbabwe.
Julian Nicholas, part of Carbon Processes, do quite a bit of work with Kavango and the crew. Custom elution plant, extraction of gold from carbon, and gold buying agent for the Zim government. There we go, 1.3 kgs.
We believe on the current trajectory, just simply improving this operation, introducing some slight procedural improvements, increasing production, we can get this operation up to between 3 to 5 kilos a month by Q1 next year. Beyond that, and our plan is to start to introduce more modern processing plant capability here and more modern bulk mining.
Okay, so when you say 3-4 kgs Q1 next year, say out of Q1 next year, what needs to happen between now and then to get to that place? That's a 3-4x increase in outputs.
So the first step is to get the 5 stamp mill operational. That will double our output immediately. We're putting improvements into the mine shafts, making them safer, using some underground drilling, looking to do proper development down there. These shafts haven't been touched for decades in some cases, so we're looking to make them safe to be able to re-enter them and to start to bring ore out ourselves. We're going to move away a little bit from some of the contract mining, so where we're relying on contract miners, we're going to start doing some of our own dedicated mining, both here and up at Prospect 4, which you guys saw earlier today. So just through those very, very simple improvements with minimum capex, we're talking capex in the region of about $300,000. We can see the kind of return to get us up to that 3 to 5 kg a month level.
And then, so Q1 next year, that's fairly short term, but if we speak about the next kind of the next jump in production and an activity here, how do you envision that and what sort of timelines? Maybe you can touch on the potential capital costs Can you just outline the plans here for Hillside?
Very, very simple, and it will all happen in parallel. So while we're looking to improve the short-term production with what we already have, we're also going to commission a 100-ton-a-day plant, a modern plant that we're going to have built in South Africa, imported into Zimbabwe, and then installed here around this project area that you can see behind us. Our aim is to have that operational by the end of Q2, and if we can get up to that point where we can be producing 100 tons a day, that will lead to a trebling of our production, and our target from the end of Q2 onwards next year is between 12 to 15 kgs a month.
Right. So and as Dale and Oliver and Clayton touched upon underground, they think that the approximate development cost to get the mine ready underground to pull 100 tons per day or so out is going to be $1 million US. And if we add in this plant that you're speaking about, 100 tons per day, maybe a bit more, what's that going to cost?
We're looking at around about 900,000 we're budgeting at the moment, although we might look at an upscaled version of the plant, depending on what the mining guys tell us is possible for how much we can pull out a day. So in total, if we budget for about $2.5 million for everything all in, we expect that will cover us through to that, really what will be a major inflection point for Kavango, because at that point, assuming we're able to hit these targets, we become profitable at the PLC level. So we cover all of our costs in Zimbabwe, all of our costs in Botswana, our PLC costs, and we're generating a surplus on top of that. So for an exploration company to be able to stand on our own 2 feet and get to that level of profitability as relatively easily as we're so far already proving here in the field in Zimbabwe, we feel that will be a very, very significant achievement and will put us ahead of most of our peers globally.
Right. So 2.5 mil, end of Q2 sort of. That's a good plan. So I guess we'll head back to the offices now and kind of zoom out a bit more and speak about the broad strategy and showcase some of the other gaps.
Let's do that.
Okay, we're currently standing right on the edge of the Jupiter pit, which is in one of Caledonia's mining leases about 100 k's north of Bulawayo. And as you can see, this proves the misconception that Zimbabwe is nothing but narrow high-grade ore deposits. This one is considerable width. It was originally mined from underground and later mined as an open pit by a company called Rebuck back in the 1980s and early 90s. They only mined the oxide ore, which they took to run a mine heap leach. The sulfides have remained untouched, except in some of the strike to the south, where it was mined, and it years between the wars probably, and it was taken to a roaster because it was arsenical.
All right, so we've been out in the field 3-4 days now. We've gone around like maniacs and seen everything. It's been a great time, lots of activity, lots of projects, and there's so much going on that we're not able to show as well. All of these mines and all of these opportunities. You can see like 5 to 10 every day. We've done our best, but Ben, so if you just reflect on what we've seen and kind of everything that we've been through now, what would you mention?
I think what I've been most pleased about over the last few days is that you've had a taste of that first trip I had to Zimbabwe, where I spent those 5 days out in the field that we've talked about with Steve. You've seen a lot of the potential that's here. We talk about this first mover advantage that Kavango has. I think you've certainly seen that. The lack of modern exploration and modern mining in this country is really quite astounding when you see the potential everywhere. I think one of the impressions I've got from you and your team is just how surprised you've been at the amount of activity there is out in the field, how well Bulawayo is performing economically, all the vehicles that we see on the streets that are bought and paid for in cash, the restaurants we've been to, the shops. Zimbabwe, as far as we're concerned, is a fantastic jurisdiction to operate in. It's certainly not without its challenges, and I think you've had a bit of a taste for some of that as well. You know, we have to be here to be strong on the ground. We know that. That's why I've moved to this country. But what I'm most pleased about is I think the welcome that you've received. We've been well received everywhere we've gone in the field. It speaks to the quality of the people out here, and also their desire to see a company like Kavango succeed. And above all, you've met our team. So these wonderful people that we've recruited. We've got a young team, very motivated, very hardworking, very creative. You've seen their passion and their commitment to the business really driving this forward. They understand what Kavango can mean to Zimbabwe, because if we are successful in our objectives, if we can show that Zimbabwe is open for business for companies like ours, I am absolutely certain that more will follow.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, a key point takeaway for us, I mean, yes, it's Africa. Zimbabwe has a bad reputation, but when you're on the ground for a few days and you see everything, you know, all the way from going out to site and seeing all the people there, if you compare that to some of the other countries out there in Africa, I think it doesn't screen a lot worse or worse or even better than some of them. And some of these countries have a lot more mining investment than Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe has almost no modern mining investment and activity. So it's a big discrepancy, right? And that's a key point, I think, trying to drive home. But you recently essentially secured a $7.5 million US commitment from your largest shareholders and also from a bunch of other shareholders for the rest. So this is a substantial raising, a transformational amount of capital to bring in. Can you outline what your use of proceeds or what your kind of path of spending this capital might look like, or probably will look like?
So it's a big step up for Kavango as we transition into becoming a mining company. In Botswana, we have this very exciting drill program where we're looking to make a major discovery in the Kalahari copper belt. The results for that so far have been excellent. The vectoring points that we've developed, we're moving closer and closer towards, we believe, economic mineralization. We've got 6,200 square kilometers of highly prospective ground. So a chunk of the funds that we've raised will go towards extending that program, because in Dave's words, he's convinced that the mineralization is there and it's only a matter of when, not if, we find it. So the extra money that we're able to bring in is going to enable us to extend that drill program. We want to keep the drill and the team operational in the field. In Zimbabwe, we're focusing now our exploration efforts on exploration for mining. So we've moved past the discovery phase. We're now looking to drill out some indicated resources that we can then turn into actual mines. And of course, finally, now that we've received the extra funds, we are going to put in place, we're going to commission a 100 ton a day plant that we might extend, that we expect will be operational by June next year. Now that would be a big step forward for Kavango, because it will mean within the space of 2 years of being operational in Zimbabwe, we'll have gone from nothing to a company able to produce over 100 tons a day of gold ore. So that will be a significant step forward, again proving this mantra that Zimbabwe is open for business.
Right, so if we kind of break that into some buckets of capital, so bots, what are you looking? I mean, what do you think it will at least initial sort of 1 year spend in bots, what do you think you will allocate?
Well, all of this will be dependent on results in the field. So, you know, we're not going to commit sort of too large a budget at this stage. We need to see how the drill results go, but I'd expect probably $3 to $4 million in Botswana, okay, with the rest of the funds being deployed into Zimbabwe, and then also holding some back in reserve as well. There are expansion opportunities that you've seen that we have in the surrounding area, where we're based in southeast of Bulawayo. So we're certainly looking at other potential projects that we can bring in, and also other exploration that we can conduct as well.
As we established, Hillside is going to cost, you know, you need to build this plant, you need to get down underground, but nothing, you know, it's cheap compared to many other places, so that's very good. And then I think we should kind of close on your 1 year vision for Kavango. So this time next year, where would you like to be at that point? And maybe we can comment also on bots. It's interesting, right? So what happens if this proves out to be a successful discovery, and then you have to potentially it will be time to sell. So if you inject 20 to 100 million, it might be a range there of capital into Cav. What happens then? I mean, then what do you think would happen in that situation? You would not divvy that out, obviously.
So our plan, we as a board, obviously, we have to develop a strategy with what we know. So at the moment, now that we have the finance in place, our goal for 12 months' time is we want to be profitable as a PLC. It really is that simple. With the potential there is for gold production at the Hillside project, we believe we can generate enough there to cover all our operational overheads, both in Zimbabwe and in Botswana, and also our PLC overhead. That would put us as an exploration company among the first of our peers globally. There are very few businesses out there like Cav that are able to make, achieve such a milestone. If we start to have a bit of a fantasy and a bit of a dream about what might happen, and let's just say we're able to sell our Kalahari Copperbelt asset for $150 million. I certainly would see us returning some of those funds, a good chunk of those funds, back to shareholders. One of the challenges we have is obviously the number of shares we have in issue at the moment. So we're looking at ways that we would be able to reduce that. Again, it's too early to commit to anything too firm, but one of my favourite mechanisms for returning funds to shareholders is through a share buyback policy. I think that would potentially make a lot of sense. But if we are able to cash ourselves up, our strategy in Zimbabwe has so far been cut to the resources we have available to us and the finance we have available to us. As you've seen over the last few days, the potential in this country is just simply staggering, and there are a number of much larger mines and much larger projects that, had Kavango got involved in before, I think it would have been too much for us to take on. Now that we're established in the country, now that we're strong in the country, if we do receive a significant injection of capital into the business, then I'd look to move Cav up the league table as we move towards this goal of ours here to build up a 10 million ounce gold producing business. So we want to develop what ultimately will be a tier 1 asset, a tier 1 company in Zimbabwe.